What are 5 common mistakes that disability applicants over the age of 50 make when choosing an onset date for their Social Security disability claims? I'm Jonathan Ginsberg. I'm a Social Security disability attorney. I represent clients in all 50 states, literally from Maine to California. I'm able to do that because disability hearings are now done by telephone or video. So it really doesn't matter where anybody is. They're not really doing live hearings except in very rare occasion. I want to talk to you today about 5 mistakes that I see in my clients over the age of 50 when they choose an onset date for their Social Security disability claims. And if you don't know what I mean by that, the onset date is the date that you contend that your disability began. This is again called the onset date. And so the first mistake I see is choosing the wrong onset date. And what I mean by that is that usually it's a safe bet to choose the last date that you worked as your onset date, because obviously disability is about your capacity to work, and when you stop working, that is typically a pretty good choice for an onset date, but it can be earlier. And when it can be earlier would be a situation where, let's say you went from full-time to part-time and you were making less than substantial gainful activity, which in 2025, $1,620 a month gross. So let's say that in March of, let's say now 2024, you went from full-time to part-time and you were making $1,000 a month, and then you finally quit or were terminated in July. Your onset date could be March. It doesn't have to be July because, again, you were working at less than substantial gainful activity level, or perhaps you were getting special help, maybe a supervisor who was a longtime friend, and you were getting special considerations, and you can make an argument that your earnings or that your job was not at SGA level. If you choose the later onset date, you could be losing out on several $1,000s, tens of thousands of dollars. So I think you want to definitely look at the onset date. You know, is the date that you stop working the correct onset date? Many times it is, but it does not always have to be that way. On the other hand, number 2 would be if you choose an onset date when you are working at SGA level, that is too early. In other words, if you were using our March 2024 date, let's say that you were working in March of 2024, but were having a lot of trouble. You were getting help from coworkers. Your supervisor gave you a little bit of a break as far as what you had to do, and you finally left in July of 2024. You might be tempted to say, well, March of 24 is my onset date. The problem is if you're making your regular salary or doing essentially the main functions of your job, then you can't really argue that you became disabled in March of 24 because you were still working at the regular job functions, and Social Security at the administrative level would not approve you at that point. And remember, there's a new emergency message in force for the next couple of years that gives adjudicators, in some cases, the right to issue fully favorable decisions based on the onset date alleged. If you choose one that's too early, not supported by the evidence, or you are working, that could be a problem. And again, it could cause you to have a case denied when it should be approved early. You can certainly change the onset date later on, but it's hard to do that at the administrative level. Number 3, I see this a lot. People use the date of their application for benefits as their onset date. In other words, they apply in October of 2024, the onset really should be July of 24, but for some reason they decide October 5th of 24 is my onset date, even though I haven't been working for 4 or 5 or 6 months. Here too, you could lose out on, several $1,000s. So you want to choose the date typically after you stop working, but the date of application really should have nothing to do with the onset date. It really needs to be based on the medical reason why you're no longer able to work. A 4th issue would be choosing an onset date after your date last insured. This one's a little tricky. And what I mean by date last insured is that when you work and pay into the system, typically your insured status follows you for about 5 years after you stop working. I've seen situations where somebody chooses an onset date, and let's say in our example that the date last insured is November 1 of 2000, November 30th, not the November, always be the end of the month, November 30th of 2024, that is your date last insured. That's when your credits run out. You choose an onset date of December 8th. of 2024. Well, the problem is your onset date is after your insurance status runs out. Therefore, you would not be eligible for Title II disability benefits. And it's hard to know what your date last insured is because that information is not really available to you until you have a case actually going on. You can get your My Social Security statement and you can look at it and see if you've worked within the last 5 years. Typically, look at the last date that you had substantial earnings over, let's say, $9,000, $10,000, and add 5 years to that. That'll tell you, generally speaking, your date last insured. So if you have to choose an earlier onset date, you can always move it forward. It's a lot more difficult to move an onset date back. So in other words, if you chose December 8th and your date last insured is November 30th, it's hard to move it back. Because Social Security will see that as you're not insured and it becomes a real problem. You can always move it forward. So if you chose, in this example, September 1st, even though there's some debate about whether the medical supported it, you can always move that forward to November 29th. So I'd rather see somebody choose an earlier onset date. We can move it forward, try to get creative as far as were they really working at SGA level? Does the medical support them? But the earliest date, if you're not sure, choose an earlier date rather than a later date. And the last thing, the fifth thing I would tell you, and I just saw this recently, is waiting years before filing for disability. I talked to a very nice person the other day who last worked over 10 years ago. And she knew she had some disability issues, but she just waited for some reason and didn't file until just recently. Well, the problem is her date last insured in this particular case is 2016. I talked to her in 2025. That means to win, she would have to literally go back and prove that she became disabled. Her medical condition was at a disabling level in 2016. Not impossible, but very, very difficult because judges are going to look and say, well, how do we know what was going on 9 years ago? It's hard to remember how you felt 9 years ago. Getting medical records, this is a practical issue that many medical practices, they consolidate, they get sold, they close. It can be very hard to actually obtain medical records going back that far, and trying to get a functional capacity evaluation from a doctor who last saw you 8 or 9 years ago, really, really hard to do. So don't wait too long. And I also see this, by the way, sometimes when people have workers' compensation cases, because you can't really file until after your comp case is over. But if the comp case drags on and you wait too long, the date last insured passes, and then you have to try to argue that your disability began 4 or 5, 6 years ago. And again, these are things that have to be discussed with an attorney. But my point is that if you think that disability is an option for you, the best thing to do would be to file as early as you possibly can using the earliest possible onset date. You can always change it later. And of course, if you have an attorney involved, your attorney can guide you on those particular issues, review the My Social Security statement and so forth. But again, if you're doing it on your own, you have to choose the earliest possible onset date and file as soon as you possibly can so that you get the process rolling sooner rather than later, and don't wait 8, 9, 10 years to do it. Please visit me online at ssdanswers.com. You can get a free Secrets to Winning Disability Survival Kit. You can also ask for a case evaluation. Please like this video if you found it useful, and subscribe to my channel. And also visit me online every Wednesday night at 8:30. I do a live stream where I answer questions live from people just like you about Social Security disability, and I hope to see you there. For now, this is Jonathan Ginsberg, wishing you the best. Thanks a lot. Hi, this is Jonathan Ginsberg, and I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like to know more about how to win your Social Security disability case, I'd like to invite you to download my Secrets to Getting Approved Early Survival Kit that I created just for people like you. Currently, I'm making the survival kit available at no cost, and I encourage you to grab your copy now. Some of the topics I cover include: how do I know if I have a case? Is it the right time for me to file my claim? 9 common mistakes that can doom your case. The 3 must-have arguments you use to win your case. And a topic that every disability claimant wants to know: how to avoid trick questions from the judge. If you or a loved one need to win Social Security disability benefits, you'll find the Survival Kit essential reading. Download your Survival Kit right now and at no cost Just visit ssdanswers.com/survival and sign up. It's that easy. Please act now. And as always, I wish you the best.